Dr. Lisa Morgan felt her stomach turn as the transport shuttle shook during its final approach to Kepler Station. She gripped her medical bag tighter and looked out the small window at the massive space station growing larger before them. The structure was huge, with spinning sections that created artificial gravity and docking, bays that could hold ships from dozens of different alien species. This was her new home for the next year. Lisa had volunteered for the Galactic Medical Exchange Program 6 months ago, back when Earth was still trying to prove itself worthy of joining the bigger galactic community. The program was simple in concept, but difficult in practice. Human. Doctors and nurses would work alongside alien medical staff on stations and planets throughout known space. They would learn about alien biology while showing that humans could be trusted to help anyone who needed medical care. The shuttle docked with a soft thud, and Lisa gathered her belongings. She had trained for 2 years to get here, learning about 17 different alien species and their basic biology. Her medical degree from Johns Hopkins had been good enough to get her into the program, but the real test would be working with patients whose blood might be green, blue, or something she had never seen before. The airlock opened with a hiss, and Lisa stepped into Kepler Station proper. The first thing that hit her was the smell. It was not bad, just different. A mixture of recycled air, alien foods, and cleaning chemicals that she could not identify. The second thing she noticed was the noise. Dozens of different voices speaking, in languages that sounded like music, grinding metal, or ocean waves. The main corridor was wide enough for large aliens to walk comfortably, with shops and restaurants lining both sides. Lisa saw her first living alien almost immediately. A tall, thin creature with blue skin and 4 arms was haggling with a shopkeeper who looked like a cross between a bear and an octopus. Neither of them paid any attention to the human woman. Walking past with her medical bags, Lisa followed the signs to the medical section, walking through corridors that curved upward due to the station's rotation. She passed more aliens than she could count, some in groups talking in their native languages, others alone and focused on their own business. A few glanced at her with what she hoped was curiosity rather than hostility. The medical bay was located in the central hub of the station, where the artificial gravity was lighter and patients could be moved more easily between different sections. Lisa found the main entrance and pressed the door control. The doors slid open to reveal a reception area that looked surprisingly familiar, despite being designed for multiple species. "You must be Dr. Morgan," said a voice behind her. Lisa turned to see a human man in his 40s wearing a security uniform. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with graying hair and tired eyes. "I am Commander Jake Phillips. I run the human security detail here on the station." Lisa shook his offered hand. "Nice to meet you, Commander. I was told there would be a security briefing sometime today." Jake nodded. "There will be, but first let me introduce you to your new colleague." He gestured toward the inner medical bay. "Dr. HFY has been looking forward to working with another human doctor." They walked through automatic doors into the main medical area. The space was larger than Lisa had expected, with examination rooms designed for different types of alien physiology. Some beds were longer for tall species, others wider for bulky ones. The equipment was a mix of human and alien technology, creating a strange but functional hybrid medical facility. Dr. HFY was waiting for them near a central workstation. He was a Vorthic, a species that looked somewhat like a tall, thin human, but with gray skin and large black eyes. His hands had 6 fingers each, and his head was slightly larger than a human's to accommodate a bigger brain. When he saw Lisa, he made a gesture with his hands that she recognized as a Vorthic greeting. "Dr. Morgan, welcome to Kepler Station," Dr. HFY said in accented but clear English. "I have read your medical records and training files. Your surgical techniques are quite innovative for a species so new to galactic medicine." Lisa smiled. "Thank you, Dr. HFY. I am looking forward to learning from you as well. The Vorthic approach to neural surgery is something I have wanted to study for months. Dr. HFY's large eyes seemed to brighten at the compliment. Excellent. We have much to teach each other. But first, let me show you our current patients. For the next 2 hours, Dr. HFY gave Lisa a tour of the medical facility and introduced her to the current patients. There was a Cronin trader who had injured his arm in a loading accident, a young Altarian female who was suffering from a respiratory infection, and an elderly Draconis who needed regular treatment for a chronic condition that affected his scales. Each species required different approaches to medical care. The Cronin had redundant organs that made surgery complicated, but also meant he could survive injuries that would kill most other species. The Altarian needed medicine that would not react badly with her unique blood chemistry. The Draconis required special equipment to examine his thick, armored skin. Lisa found herself fascinated by the challenges. Human medicine had always been complex, but alien medicine required her to think in completely new ways. She had to consider not just different biologies, but different psychologies as well. Some species responded well to direct communication about their conditions, while others preferred to have family members receive medical information first. Commander Phillips joined them for lunch in the medical bay's small break room, over sandwiches. That tasted almost like Earth food. He briefed Lisa on the current political situation. Things have been tense lately, Jake explained between bites. There is a group called the Hegemony that has been making noise about human expansion into this sector. They think we are moving too fast and taking up too much space. Dr. HFY made a clicking sound that Lisa had learned indicated disagreement. The Hegemony speaks from fear and jealousy. Humans have proven themselves valuable members of the galactic community. Your medical advances alone have saved thousands of lives across dozens of species. Jake nodded but still looked worried. That may be true, Doctor, but the Hegemony has military ships, and they are not afraid to use them. Their leader, War Chief Krax, has been especially vocal about what he calls human interference in galactic affairs. Lisa set down her sandwich. Are we in any real danger here? Probably not, Jake said, but his tone suggested he was not completely certain. Diplomatic facilities like this station are usually considered off-limits for military action. But the Hegemony has been known to push boundaries before. The conversation was interrupted by an alarm from the main medical bay. Dr. HFY immediately stood up and rushed toward the sound, with Lisa close behind. They found the young Altarian patient in distress, her breathing rapid and shallow. Lisa quickly ran a scanner over the patient while Dr. HFY checked her vital signs on the monitoring equipment. The results were not good. The respiratory infection had spread to her secondary lung chambers, a complication that could be fatal if not treated immediately. For the next 3 hours, Lisa and Dr. HFY worked together to save the young Altarian's life. They used a combination of human and Vorthic surgical techniques, along with medicine that had been specifically developed for Altarian biology. Lisa found herself completely focused on the patient, forgetting about politics and tensions as she concentrated on the delicate work of healing. When they finally stabilized the patient, both doctors were exhausted but satisfied. The young Altarian was breathing normally, and her family members who had been waiting anxiously in the corridor were finally able to see her. Excellent work, Dr. Morgan, Dr. HFY said as they cleaned up the surgical area. Your adaptation to alien physiology is remarkable. You have a natural gift for cross-species medicine. Lisa felt proud of the compliment, but also humble. She was still learning, still making mistakes, still discovering new things about alien biology every day. But she was also helping people, beings from across the galaxy, who needed medical care and trusted her to provide it. As her first day on Kepler Station came to an end, Lisa felt hopeful about her mission. She was here to heal, to learn, and to show that humans could be trusted partners in the galactic community. She believed that medicine was a universal language, one that could bridge the gaps between different species and cultures. She had no idea that someone was watching the medical bay very carefully, taking notes about human medical personnel and their daily routines. She did not know that War Chief Krax had already decided that humans were a threat that needed to be eliminated. Starting with their most vulnerable representatives, Lisa Morgan went to sleep that night thinking about the young Altarian patient she had helped save. Proud of the work she was doing and excited about the challenges ahead. It would be her last peaceful night on Kepler Station. The attack came at dawn station time. Lisa Morgan was checking on her patients when the first explosion shook the medical bay. Emergency lights flashed red as alarms screamed throughout Kepler Station. She grabbed onto a medical bed to keep from falling as another blast, closer this time, made the entire section shake. What is happening? Dr. HFY called out from across the room where he was trying to calm frightened patients. Lisa ran to the communication panel and pressed the emergency button. Medical bay to security. Commander Phillips, what is our status? Jake's voice came through, filled with static and the sound of weapons fire. We are under attack. Hegemony forces have boarded the station. They are targeting medical areas specifically. Get your patients to the emergency shelters now. Lisa felt her blood turn cold. Medical areas were supposed to be safe zones during conflicts. No civilized species attacked hospitals or medical facilities. It was one of the most basic rules of galactic warfare. She and Dr. HFY began moving patients toward the emergency exits, but they were too slow. The young Altarian female Lisa had saved the day before was still too weak to walk. The elderly Draconis could barely move without assistance. The Cronin trader was trying to help, but his injured arm made him clumsy. The doors to the medical bay exploded inward. Through the smoke and debris came creatures Lisa had only seen in military briefings. Mortani warriors, 8 feet tall with thick gray skin and razor-sharp claws. Their leader wore the red markings of a war chief and carried weapons that crackled with energy. Kill the humans, the war chief growled in basic galactic standard. Leave the others as witnesses. Lisa stepped in front of her patients, her hands raised. This is a medical facility. These people are under my care. You cannot attack a hospital. The war chief looked at her with yellow eyes that held no mercy. You are Dr. Lisa Morgan. Your file says you have saved many lives on this station. That makes you dangerous to our cause. Lisa did not understand what he meant, but she did not have time to ask. The Mortani warriors raised their weapons. In her final moments, Lisa Morgan did not think about herself. She thought about her patients, about Dr. HFY, about all the beings she had tried to help. She managed to activate her emergency communicator. Just before the energy blast hit her, multiple casualties in medical bay. Request immediate assistance. Dr. Lisa Morgan, signing off. The message traveled through subspace communication networks. Reaching Earth 12 hours later, General Patricia Hayes was having coffee in her Pentagon office when the priority alert came through her secure terminal. She read the first report, then the second, then the third. Her coffee grew cold as she realized what she was reading. 3 medical stations attacked simultaneously. Kepler Station, Proxima Medical Center, and the hospital ship Mercy's Grace. 47 human medical personnel confirmed dead. Doctors, nurses, medical technicians, and support staff. All killed in coordinated attacks by hegemony forces. Patricia Hayes had been a soldier for 30 years. She had seen combat on a dozen worlds and commanded troops in conflicts that most civilians never heard about. She thought she had seen every kind of warfare that existed. But this was something new. This was the deliberate targeting of healers. She picked up her secure phone and dialed a number that connected directly to the White House Situation Room. Mr. President, we have a situation. 2 hours later, President Richard Cole sat at the head of a table surrounded by the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Secretary of Defense, and the heads of several agencies that officially did not exist. The briefing was short and brutal. "They specifically hunted our medical personnel," General Hayes explained, her voice steady but her eyes burning with anger. "This was not random violence or collateral damage. Intelligence reports show they had detailed files on every human doctor and nurse in their target zones." President Cole looked at the casualty list. Names and faces of people who had volunteered to serve in the most dangerous assignment imaginable. Healing aliens who might not understand human medicine, working in environments where they had no backup, trusting that civilized beings would respect the universal nature of medical care. "What are our options?" the President asked. Secretary of Defense William Grant spoke first. "We can file formal protests through diplomatic channels, demand that the Galactic Council condemn these attacks, impose economic sanctions." "How long will that take?" "Months, maybe years. And there is no guarantee it will work." President Cole turned to General Hayes. "Military options? We could deploy our standard fleet units, engage their forces in conventional warfare, show them that attacking humans has consequences, and—" General Hayes smiled, but there was no warmth in her expression. "Or we could show them why we have been so careful to keep our monsters on a leash." The room fell silent. Everyone present knew what she meant, but nobody had expected to hear it said out loud. "Explain," the President said quietly. "For 50 years, we have been trying to prove to the galaxy that humans are civilized. We send diplomats, scientists, doctors, engineers. We show them our best and brightest, our most peaceful and helpful people. We have been so focused on proving we are not monsters that we forgot something important. Which is, sometimes monsters are exactly what you need." The President stared at her for a long moment. "Are you recommending we authorize Project Nightfall?" Project Nightfall existed in files so classified that most of the people in the room were not sure it was real. It was a program that recruited humans who were too dangerous for normal military service, too violent for peacekeeping operations, too creative in their approach to warfare for civilized conflict. "I am recommending we remind the galaxy why we keep these people locked away," General Hayes said. "The hegemony thinks we are soft because they have only seen our healers and our diplomats. They think attacking our medical personnel will make other species afraid to associate with us. And you think releasing our worst people will change their minds? I think showing them what we are capable of when our healers are threatened will make sure this never happens again." The vote was unanimous. Within 6 hours, recruiters were visiting addresses that did not appear on any public records. They were looking for people whose military files were marked with red flags, whose psychological profiles contained words like excessive aggression and incompatible with standard operations. Captain Steve Ross had been living in a cabin in Alaska for 3 years, ever since his discharge from the Marines. The official reason was conduct unbecoming an officer. The real reason was that he had scared his own commanding officers with his approach to combat. When the recruiter found him, he was chopping wood and wondering if he would ever get to fight again. "Steve Ross?" the recruiter asked. "Depends who is asking. Someone who has a job for you. Someone who needs people killed and does not care how it gets done." Steve set down his axe and looked at the man in the expensive suit. "What kind of job?" "The kind where you get to hunt people who kill doctors." Steve smiled for the first time. "In 3 years. When do we start?" Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos had been retired from Special Forces for 2 years when they found her in Montana. She was living off the grid, hunting and fishing, and trying to forget about the things she had done in places that officially did not exist. The recruiter who visited her did not waste time with small talk. "Maria Santos? I am retired. Not anymore. Someone killed a bunch of our medical personnel. We need someone who specializes in making people afraid. Maria looked at the recruiter. For a long moment, medical personnel, doctors and nurses? 47 of them. Targeted specifically because they were healers. Maria Santos had killed enemy soldiers, terrorists, and war criminals. She had done terrible things in service of her country and slept well at night because she knew they were necessary. But she had never hurt anyone whose job was to save lives. Who? Do I kill? She asked Dr. Nathan Clark, who was not a medical doctor, despite his title. His doctorate was in biochemistry, with specializations in toxicology and biological warfare. He had been quietly working for agencies that did not officially exist, developing weapons that were too terrible for civilized warfare. When the phone rang in his isolated laboratory, he knew what it meant. Nathan, they killed our healers. How many? 47 confirmed. Doctors, nurses, medical technicians. Nathan Clark had spent his career creating biological weapons. He understood disease and poison better than most people understood their own families. But his weapons had always been theoretical, designed, but never used, too dangerous for deployment against civilized enemies. What do you need? He asked. We need you to show them what happens when someone attacks our medical personnel. Any restrictions? Make it hurt. Nathan Clark smiled and began opening files that had been locked away for years. Biological weapons. Designed specifically for alien physiology. Toxins that could target specific species while leaving others untouched. Diseases that attacked not just the body, but the mind. The hegemony had made a mistake. They thought humans were weak because they sent doctors to heal and diplomats to talk. They thought that attacking the most peaceful humans would demonstrate their own strength and frighten other species away from allying with Earth. They were about to learn that humanity's greatest strength was not their capacity for violence. It was. War Chief Krax stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Blood Hammer, and watched the stars through the main viewing screen. 3 weeks had passed since his forces had successfully eliminated human medical personnel from 3 key stations. The attacks had been perfect, sending a clear message to the galaxy that humans were not as protected as they pretended to be. He expected the humans to respond with their usual diplomatic protests and economic sanctions. Perhaps they would send their regular military forces for a few skirmishes that would prove how outmatched they were against superior hegemony technology. What he did not expect was silence. For 3 weeks there had been no official response. From Earth, no angry messages through diplomatic channels. No fleet movements that hegemony intelligence could detect. Nothing but an eerie quiet that made some of his officers nervous. War Chief, his communications officer called out. We are receiving reports from Patrol Fleet 7. 3 of their ships have missed their scheduled check-ins. Krax turned from the viewing screen. Equipment problems? Unknown, sir. They were patrolling the Outer Rim territories, well within our controlled space. There should be no enemy forces in that area. Send a search squadron to investigate. The search squadron found debris. Twisted metal floating in space, life pods that had been deliberately punctured, and sensor logs that made no sense. The 3 missing ships had been destroyed, but not by any weapons that appeared in hegemony databases. There were no energy signatures from human plasma cannons or projectile weapons. No residue from their standard explosives. Instead, the wreckage showed signs of close-range combat. Hull breaches that looked like they had been cut from the inside. Airlocks that had been opened during battle, venting atmosphere into space. Most disturbing of all, the ship's own security systems had been turned against their crews. This does not make sense, Krax's intelligence officer reported. How can a ship be destroyed from the inside with no sign of enemy boarding parties? But there were signs if you knew how to look for them. Captain Steve Ross had led his team aboard all 3 ships using methods that hegemony technology could not detect. They had used magnetic clamps to attach their small craft to the ship's hulls, then cut through with tools that left no energy signature. They had moved through the ships like ghosts, eliminating crews with weapons that made no sound and left no trace. Steve's team was not interested in destroying ships. They were interested in sending a message. They wanted the hegemony to know that their ships were not safe, even in their own territory. They wanted survivors who could tell stories that would spread fear through enemy ranks. On the second ship, they had left 3 crew members alive in the escape pods. These survivors had watched their entire crew disappear one by one, hearing screams over the communication system, but seeing nothing on security cameras. By the time Steve's team was finished, the survivors were convinced they had been attacked by demons. "Something is hunting us," one of the survivors reported when the search squadron found him. "It moves through the ship like smoke. You can hear it talking, but you cannot see it. It knows our ship better than we do." Cracks dismissed the report as combat stress and fear. But 2 days later, another patrol disappeared, then another. Each time, the wreckage told the same story. Ships destroyed from within by enemies who left no trace of their presence. The fear began to spread through hegemony ranks. Crews started reporting strange sounds in their ships during night shifts. Officers began seeing shadows in corridors that should have been empty. Veteran warriors who had fought in dozens of battles began requesting transfers to ground assignments. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos was conducting her own campaign on the surface. The hegemony had established several forward bases on contested worlds, using them to launch raids against civilian targets. Santos had been given a list of these bases and told to eliminate them in whatever way she thought would be most effective. Her first target was the command base on Rigel 7. The base housed 300 hegemony soldiers and served as a coordination center for raids throughout the sector. It was heavily defended with energy shields, automated weapon systems, and elite guards. Santos studied the base for 2 days before making her move. She did not attack during the day when the defenders were alert and ready. She did not attack at night when they expected stealth operations. Instead, she attacked during the shift change, when half the guards were leaving their posts, and half were arriving to take their places. She entered the base through the water recycling system, a route that no hegemony commander would expect, because it required crawling through toxic waste for over 2 hours. Santos had trained in environments that made toxic waste seem pleasant. Once inside, she began her work. She did not try to fight 300 soldiers at once. Instead, she turned the base into a hunting ground where the soldiers became prey. Her first targets were the communication officers. She eliminated them silently, cutting off the base's ability to call for help or coordinate with other facilities. Then she moved to the power control center and sabotaged the lighting system. Not all at once, but gradually. Lights began failing in different sections, creating areas of darkness that moved through the base like a living thing. The hegemony soldiers began to realize something was wrong when their comrades started disappearing. At first, they thought it was equipment failure. Soldiers sometimes got lost in large bases, especially during shift changes. But when they found the first body, they knew they were under attack. The dead soldier had been killed by someone who understood hegemony anatomy perfectly. The wounds were precise, designed to disable quickly and quietly. More disturbing, the body had been positioned in a way that suggested the killer wanted it to be found. Santos had studied hegemony psychology as well as their biology. She knew that they were proud warriors who feared very little, but they did fear the unknown. She made sure that every body was found in a different condition, killed by a different method, positioned in a way that created maximum psychological impact. Some soldiers were found hanging from ceiling fixtures in corridors. They had walked through minutes before. Others were discovered in storage rooms they had just searched, positioned as if they had been there for hours. The most disturbing finds were soldiers who had been killed and then arranged to look like they were still on duty, standing at their posts until someone got close enough to realize they were dead. The base commander tried to organize a systematic search, but Santos stayed one step ahead of them. She had memorized the base layout and knew every hiding spot, every maintenance tunnel, every blind corner. When search teams went looking for her, they often found more bodies instead. By the third hour of her assault, the remaining soldiers were no longer trying to find the intruder. They were trying to escape. But Santos had sabotaged the communication system and the transportation bay. The base had become a prison, and she was the warden. When the relief force arrived 12 hours later, they found a base full of dead soldiers and one survivor. The survivor was a young hegemony warrior who had hidden in a supply closet for 8 hours, listening to the screams of his comrades echoing through the corridors. What happened here? The relief commander asked. The survivor looked at him with eyes that had seen too much. A demon. A human demon that knows how we think, how we fight, how we die. It hunted us like animals at our own base. How many humans attacked you? One. Just one. The relief commander did not believe the report until he saw the bodies. 300 soldiers killed by a single human who had turned their own base against them. The security footage showed nothing useful. Just soldiers disappearing from corridors that appeared to be empty. But Santos had left one clear message. In the base commander's office, written on the wall in symbols that would be understood by any hegemony soldier, were the words, "You killed our healers. Now you know what our killers can do." Within days, the story spread through hegemony military networks. A human demon who could move through solid walls. A monster that could kill 300 soldiers without being seen. A creature that understood their weaknesses better than they understood themselves. The psychological warfare was working perfectly. Hegemony forces began reporting equipment failures that turned out to be fear. Soldiers started requesting medical leave for stress-related conditions. Officers began sleeping with lights on and guards posted outside their quarters. War Chief Cracks tried to maintain discipline, but even his own crew was affected. They jumped at shadows and reported intruders. That turned out to be their own reflections. The proud hegemony military was becoming afraid of an enemy they could not see, could not predict, and could not understand. But Steve Ross and Maria Santos were just the beginning. Their job was to create fear and confusion, to make the enemy afraid to sleep at night. The real weapon was still being prepared in a laboratory where Dr. Nathan Clark was creating something that would make physical death seem merciful compared to what he had planned for the species that had dared to kill human healers. Dr. Nathan Clark stood in his laboratory aboard the research vessel Nightfall, looking at the samples floating in tanks of green liquid. Each tank contained tissue samples from different hegemony species, collected over months of careful research. The Mortani, the Vexhi, the Caridians, and 7 other species that had joined together to attack human medical personnel. Nathan had spent 20 years studying alien biology, but not to heal like Dr. Lisa Morgan had tried to do. His research focused on weaknesses, on finding ways to harm alien species if Earth ever needed weapons that conventional military force could not provide. His work had always been theoretical before, locked away and classified. Files that most people hoped would never be opened. The attack on the medical stations had changed that. Now his research had a purpose, and Nathan Clark was very good at his job. He walked to the first tank, which contained Mortani tissue samples. The Mortani were proud of their physical strength and their natural resistance to most biological weapons. Their immune systems could fight off diseases that would kill other species in hours. Their bodies could process toxins that would be fatal to humans or most aliens, but Nathan was not interested in their strengths. He was interested in their minds. The Mortani brain was larger than a human brain, with additional sections that controlled their enhanced physical abilities and tactical thinking. These extra brain sections were what made them such effective warriors, but they were also their weakness. The neural pathways that gave them superior combat skills were vulnerable to very specific types of biological attack Nathan had created. Something special for them. It was not a disease in the traditional sense. It was more like a biological computer virus that attacked nerve cells in very specific areas of the Mortani brain. The pathogen would not kill them quickly. Instead, it would slowly destroy their ability to think tactically, to make complex decisions, to coordinate military operations. The delivery system was even more elegant. Nathan had learned that Mortani used chemical signals called pheromones to communicate with each other. These pheromones carried information about rank, emotional state, and tactical intentions. Nathan had created artificial pheromones that looked and smelled exactly like the real ones, but carried his biological weapon instead of information. He moved to his workstation and began preparing the first batch for deployment. The artificial pheromones would be released into the air systems of hegemony bases and ships. The Mortani would breathe them in without realizing anything was wrong. Within days, their military leadership would begin making mistakes. Within weeks, their entire command structure would collapse, but Nathan was not finished. He had studied all 9 hegemony species, and he had weapons designed for each of them. The Vexhi were next. They were smaller than humans but much faster, with reaction times that made them nearly impossible to hit in combat. Their speed came from a unique nervous system that processed information faster than most other species could think. Nathan had created a toxin that would slowly damage their neural pathways, making them slower and clumsier over time. The Caridians were known for their teamwork and coordination. They could function as a group mind during combat, sharing thoughts and reactions instantly across large numbers of soldiers. Nathan's weapon for them was a biological agent that would disrupt the brain chemicals they used for this group communication. Without their ability to coordinate, Caridian military units would become confused and disorganized. Each weapon was designed to be subtle. The hegemony would not realize they were under biological attack until it was too late to stop it. They would think their declining performance was due to stress, poor training, or equipment failures. By the time they figured out what was happening, their military would be crippled. Nathan loaded the first batch of artificial Mortani pheromones into deployment canisters. These would be delivered by Steve Ross's stealth teams, who could infiltrate enemy ships and stations without being detected. The pheromones would be released into air circulation systems, spreading throughout entire facilities within hours. 3 days later, the first reports began coming in from hegemony territory. Mortani commanders were making unusual tactical errors. Simple military operations were being bungled by officers who had previously been considered brilliant strategists. Fleet movements that should have been coordinated were becoming confused and ineffective. War Chief Krax was among the first to be affected, though he did not realize it. He had been breathing the artificial pheromones for 72 hours when he called a meeting with his senior officers to discuss the human threat. The meeting that should have lasted 1 hour stretched to 4 hours as Krax found himself unable to concentrate on complex strategic planning. The humans are using some kind of new stealth technology, he told his officers, his words coming slower than usual. We need to. He paused, forgetting what he had been about to say. His communications officer looked concerned. War Chief, are you feeling well? Krax shook his massive head, trying to clear his thoughts. I am fine. Where were we discussing? The human stealth technology, sir. Yes, right. We need to develop countermeasures. But even as he said it, Krax could not remember what specific countermeasures he had been planning to suggest. The meeting ended with no decisions being made and no clear plan of action. Krax's officers left feeling confused and concerned about their leader's apparent inability to focus on important military matters. Similar scenes were playing out across Hegemony space as Mortani commanders found themselves struggling with decisions that had once been simple. Fleet admirals forgot basic tactical principles. Ground commanders made errors that cost them battles against weaker opponents. The pride of the hegemony military was slowly becoming incompetent. Meanwhile, Nathan's other weapons were being deployed against the remaining hegemony species. The Vex High began experiencing strange accidents as their famous reflexes started failing them. Pilots crashed ships they should have been able to fly with their eyes closed. Soldiers tripped over obstacles they should have seen coming from far away. The Caridians found their group coordination breaking down. Military units that had moved like single organisms began stumbling over each other, unable to share thoughts and reactions the way they had for thousands of years. Orders were misunderstood, communications became garbled, and their famous teamwork dissolved into chaos. But the most devastating weapon was still the one targeting the Mortani leadership. War Chief Krax's condition continued to deteriorate as the biological agent attacked more areas of his brain. He began forgetting important meetings, giving contradictory orders, and losing track of basic strategic concepts. His subordinates started to question his fitness for command. Admiral Vorth, his second in command, requested a private meeting to discuss the War Chief's recent performance. War Chief, the other species in our alliance are beginning to lose confidence in Mortani leadership, Admiral Vorth said carefully. There have been too many tactical errors, too many missed opportunities. Krax stared at him blankly for several seconds before responding. Tactical errors? What tactical errors? Sir, yesterday you ordered Fleet Group 7 to attack a human convoy, then forgot to send them the attack coordinates. They spent 6 hours flying in circles waiting for instructions. I do not remember that. And last week, you approved a supply requisition for ice mining equipment to be sent to our desert base on Kepler Prime. Krax felt a cold fear growing in his chest. He could not remember these incidents, but they sounded like things he might have done. His thoughts felt cloudy and unfocused, like trying to think through thick fog. Perhaps I have been working too hard, he said weakly. Admiral Vorth studied his commanding officer with growing alarm. War Chief Krax had been one of the most brilliant military minds in hegemony history. The idea that he could forget basic tactical operations was unthinkable. Sir, I think you should see a medical officer. The medical examination revealed nothing that hegemony doctors could understand. Krax's physical health was perfect. His brain scans showed normal activity in all areas. There was no sign of injury, disease, or any condition that their medical technology could identify. What they could not detect was Nathan Clark's biological weapon, which had been designed specifically to avoid detection by alien medical equipment. The pathogen was breaking down neural connections in microscopic ways that would not show up on standard brain scans. As Krax's condition worsened, the hegemony alliance began to fall apart. The other species had joined the alliance because of Mortani military leadership and tactical brilliance. Without that leadership, they began to question whether the alliance was worth maintaining. The Vex High were dealing with their own problems, as their soldiers became increasingly clumsy and accident-prone. The Caridians were struggling with communication, breakdowns that made coordinated military action nearly impossible. The smaller species in the alliance began looking for ways to distance themselves from what was clearly becoming a disaster. Nathan Clark monitored the reports from his laboratory with professional satisfaction. His biological weapons were performing exactly as designed. The hegemony military was destroying itself from within, and they had no idea they were under attack. But he was not thin. 6 months after the attack on the medical stations, the Galactic Council held an emergency meeting on the neutral world of Harmony Prime. Representatives from hundreds of species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall. But the most important seat belonged to Ambassador Helen Price, who represented Earth and humanity. The hall was filled with nervous energy. Everyone had heard the reports coming out of former hegemony space. An entire military alliance had collapsed overnight. Species that had been aggressive and confident were now requesting protection from other galactic powers. War fleets that had once threatened entire sectors were falling apart from within. The Altarian delegate spoke first, his voice carrying across the assembly hall. Ambassador Price, the Council needs to understand what happened to the hegemony forces. Our intelligence reports are disturbing. Helen Price stood at the human delegation table. She was a career diplomat who had spent her life building bridges between species and negotiating peaceful solutions to conflicts. But she also understood that sometimes peace could only be maintained through the threat of violence. The hegemony made a strategic error, she said, her voice calm and professional. They believed that attacking human medical personnel would demonstrate our weakness to the galaxy. They thought that killing our doctors and nurses would make other species afraid to associate with humanity. She activated a holographic display that showed the current state of former hegemony territory. Where once there had been coordinated military bases and organized fleet movements, now there was chaos. Ships drifted without purpose. Bases had been abandoned or were operating at minimal capacity. Entire species were requesting asylum from their former allies. What they failed to understand, Helen continued, is that humans did not send medical personnel to the stars because we are weak. We sent them because we are strong enough to protect them. We sent them because we believed that healing was more important than hurting. The Vorthic delegate, Dr. Zexhai's cousin, raised one of his six-fingered hands. Ambassador Price, what exactly happened to the hegemony forces? Our medical teams have examined some of the survivors, and they show signs of biological warfare, unlike anything we have seen before. Helen's expression did not change, but something cold flickered behind her diplomatic smile. The hegemony forces experienced a series of unfortunate military setbacks. Equipment failures, tactical errors, command breakdowns. These things happen in warfare. But the pattern of failures suggests deliberate sabotage, the Caridian representative insisted. Entire command structures collapsed simultaneously. Military leaders suffered sudden cognitive decline. Fleet coordination became impossible. This was not random failure. No, Helen agreed. It was not random. It was very, very precise. She changed the holographic display to show casualty reports from the original attack on the medical stations. Photos of Dr. Lisa Morgan, Dr. Kevin Barnes, Nurse Amy Carter, and 44 other humans who had died trying to provide medical care to alien species. These people volunteered to work in the most dangerous assignment humanity could offer. Helen said, they went to alien worlds to heal beings they had never met, using medicine they had to learn from scratch, trusting that civilized species would respect the universal nature of medical care. The assembly hall fell silent as delegates looked at the faces of the dead humans. Young doctors who had given up comfortable lives on Earth to serve in frontier medical stations. Experienced nurses who had trained for years to work with alien biology. Medical technicians who had volunteered for assignments where they might never see home again. The hegemony murdered them, Helen continued. Not as collateral damage in a military operation, but as specific targets. They studied our medical personnel, learned their routines, and hunted them down like animals. The Draconis delegate, an elderly creature whose scales had turned silver with age, spoke in a voice that rumbled like distant thunder. We understand human anger, Ambassador Price, but the response seems disproportionate. Entire fleets have been destroyed. Military bases have been eliminated. Biological weapons have been deployed against civilian populations. Helen turned to face the Draconis delegate directly. Biological weapons? I am not aware of any biological weapons being used against civilian populations. Our reports indicate that former hegemony military personnel have been experiencing stress-related health problems following their recent defeats. But that hardly qualifies as biological warfare. The lie was so smooth and professional that it took several seconds for the delegates to realize what she had said. The hegemony forces had not been defeated in conventional battles. They had simply stopped functioning. Furthermore, Helen continued, I must correct your characterization of the response as disproportionate. The humans who conducted operations against hegemony forces were very careful to limit their actions to military targets. No hospitals were attacked. No medical facilities were destroyed. No doctors or nurses were harmed. She paused to let that sink in. We learned that lesson from the hegemony. The difference is that we learned it correctly. The Altarian delegate shifted nervously in his seat. Ambassador Price, what assurance can you give us that these responses will not be directed at other species in the future? Helen smiled, and for a moment, the diplomatic mask slipped just enough to reveal something that made veteran diplomats throughout the assembly hall take a step back. The assurance is simple, she said. Do not attack our healers. The message was clear, but the Caridian representative felt compelled to ask for clarification. And if there are misunderstandings, accidents, situations where human medical personnel might be harmed during legitimate military operations. There are no accidents when it comes to medical facilities, Helen replied. Medical stations, hospital ships, and treatment centers are clearly marked and protected under galactic law. Any species that claims to have accidentally attacked human medical personnel will discover that we do not believe in accidents. The assembly hall erupted in quiet conversation as delegates whispered among themselves. The message was unmistakable. Humanity was offering the galaxy a choice. They could have human doctors and nurses working to save lives across known space, protected by the knowledge that harming them would bring swift and terrible retribution. Or they could drive humanity away and lose access to the most innovative medical care in the galaxy. It was not really a choice at all. Over the following months, human medical personnel returned to their posts throughout galactic space. But things were different now. When Dr. Sarah Kim arrived at Kepler Station to replace Dr. Lisa Morgan, she found that the medical bay was treated almost like sacred ground. Alien patients approached her with a mixture of gratitude and awe. They understood that she represented both humanity's greatest gift to the galaxy and their most dangerous warning. The young Altarian who had been saved by Dr. Morgan's sacrifice brought flowers from her homeworld and placed them at a memorial that had been built in the medical bay. Dr. Morgan saved my life, the young Altarian told Dr. Kim. I want to be a doctor too, so I can help people the way she helped me. Dr. Kim smiled and put her hand on the young alien's shoulder. She would be proud of you for wanting to help others. That is what doctors do. We heal, but what if someone tries to hurt you like they hurt Dr. Morgan? Dr. Kim's smile did not change, but her eyes grew distant for a moment. Then someone else will take care of that problem. My job is to heal. Other people have different jobs. The other people had returned to their shadows, their work complete. Captain Steve Ross was officially listed as retired and living in Alaska, though his cabin remained empty most of the time. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Santos had disappeared back into the Montana wilderness, but intelligence agencies around the galaxy kept very careful track of her location. Dr. Nathan Clark continued his research in laboratories that did not officially exist, developing weapons that would hopefully never be needed. But they were ready, just in case someone else decided to test humanity's commitment to protecting their healers. The galaxy had learned a valuable lesson. Humanity's capacity for compassion was matched only by their capacity for calculated, precise violence. They had proven they could be trusted with the responsibility of healing. The hegemony had forced them to prove they could be trusted with the responsibility of judgment. The memorial wall in the medical bay on Kepler Station bore the names of all 47 humans who had died in the attacks. Below their names was a simple inscription: they healed, others avenged, none forgotten. Alien medical students from across the galaxy came to study at the memorial, learning not just about human medicine, but about the price of threatening those who dedicated their lives to saving others. The lesson was always the same: healers were sacred, and harming them was not just murder, but an invitation to meet the monsters that humanity kept carefully contained. War Chief Krax's final log entry had been recovered from the wreckage of his flagship and distributed through intelligence networks across the galaxy. It contained only one coherent sentence: "We should have left their healers alone." Every species in the galaxy agreed. The human healers returned to their work, protected. Not Rue.